Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Day 1145 of the Trump administration, leaving 239 days to go until our 2020 presidential election. And our current president is facing what is easily his largest leadership crisis, serious business that involves the loss of human life. He has also become a part of the story as of today, when several people who've had contact with him, including one guy who flew with him on Air Force One today, have agreed to quarantine themselves because they have come in contact with the virus. And our vice president didn't know this evening when asked if our president had been tested for the coronavirus. Turned out he has, and he has not been tested for the coronavirus. The spread of it is changing life in America as it already has overseas. The U.S. has about 700 confirmed cases now, and here is what the Surgeon General said about the government response today.
We are shifting from a containment posture, where we're trying to keep the virus out of communities, to one of mitigation. We expect the number of cases to go up rapidly.
This was a terrible day on the financial markets. The Dow fell over 2,000 points. Most people live their whole lives without seeing something like that. Indeed, the largest single-day point drop in history. The sell-off was so intense that just after the opening bell, trading was halted as a precaution for the first time in more than 2 decades. Oil is now at its lowest price in decades. Russia and the Saudis are fighting over price, which will crush some of the smaller players in the market, no doubt. And earlier tonight, just a few hours after the markets closed, Trump appeared at the now daily White House coronavirus briefing to tell the nation that he's focused on dealing with the economic fallout from the outbreak.
We just attended a very important task force meeting on the virus that everybody is talking about all over the world, no matter where you go. That's what's on people's minds, and we are going to take care of. We are going to be asking tomorrow, we're seeing the Senate. We're going to be meeting with House Republicans, Mitch McConnell, everybody, and discussing a possible payroll tax cut or relief, substantial relief, very substantial relief. That's a big number. We're going to be working with companies and small companies, large companies, a lot of companies, so that they don't get penalized for something that's not their fault. This was something that we were thrown into, and we're going to handle it, and we have been handling it very well.
And now, as we mentioned, there are questions about the president's own possible exposure to those who've been exposed to the virus. Over the weekend, we learned a person who attended the annual CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference, a few weeks ago, was in close contact with several Republican lawmakers, including Senator Ted Cruz, Congressman Paul Gosar, Congressman Doug Collins. All three have announced they have chosen to self-quarantine. After his CPAC exposure, Collins was on hand to greet the president by shaking hands. That was just on Friday as he toured the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. Congressman Matt Gaetz, who last week showed up to vote on coronavirus funding wearing a gas mask, learned of the first fatality in his own Florida congressional district this weekend. He has since learned he also came into contact with that CPAC attendee. He is now under self-quarantine. But before he learned of his exposure, he boarded Air Force One today with the president after attending a party with the president at Mar-a-Lago. Another Republican lawmaker, Texas Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert, a rapturous Trump supporter, said he too was warned he may have been exposed at CPAC, but he's decided not to self-quarantine and return to Washington instead. The incoming White House Chief of Staff, North Carolina Congressman Mark Meadows, says he's tested negative for coronavirus, but says he'll stay in quarantine until Wednesday because he's learned he was also in contact with the infected person at CPAC. Tonight, White House reporters asked the vice president if the president's been tested.
Has the president been tested? He's been in contact with people who were in proximity to somebody who had the virus.
Let me be sure and get you an answer to that. I honestly don't know the answer.
Not long ago tonight, the White House did provide an answer. The press secretary issued a statement that reads in part, and we quote, "President has not received COVID-19 testing because he has neither had prolonged close contact with any known confirmed patients, nor does he have any symptoms. President Trump remains in excellent health, and his physician will continue to closely monitor him." Former White House Chief of Staff Leon Panetta, who also happens to have been a Secretary of Defense and CIA director, notes that this public health crisis is testing the president's credibility.
This president has had a hard time with the truth since he entered the presidency and before that. The American people want to be able to trust what the president is saying to them. But in many ways, he's forfeited that trust by the fact that he continues to shade the truth.
It is Wednesday, the 11th of March of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of this meddlesome priest? Will no one? Okay, well, I'm insisting that the Republican Party, all in all, should continue shaking hands. Please do. All right? But the only problem is, if they get it, they're going to spread it beyond the confines of their party. So, wash your hands anyway, everybody. I don't care. I'm making a joke. If you're going to shake hands, wash your hands. Oh, my God. Well, they all got a briefing yesterday, Nunes and the rest, and a sobering briefing from what has been reported. Oh, and it was only the Republicans, by the way. Democrats aren't allowed anymore. Regardless, the Repugs got a sobering briefing that it pretty much looks like most everybody in America is going to get COVID-19. And I guess that means it's a pandemic. And what does a pandemic mean to the Repugs? Loss of revenue somewhere. And if people are too sick to go out and buy the medicine, what are you going to do? Overprice the medicine that no one can buy because they're too sick to go buy it? If they even have the money. Yeah, this is sobering, all right. It goes right along the lines of what I've said all along. Mobsters always play catch-up. Leaders lead. We had a great leader from the previous 8 years before this administration, who was a forward thinker, a planner, a leader. Looked ahead. Bolstered those programs that were already in place and set up new ones where needed. And what was that? To pretty much, protect the general welfare and the security of the United States of America. Now look where we are. Mnuchin has gone off and went ahead and signed some agreement with a Russian ambassador. We don't know which one. pretty much putting the final nail in the coffin in the selling out of America. That's one way to look at it. But the final mark that puts the agreement in motion that Vlad and Trump agreed to in Helsinki. And what is that agreement that Mnuchin just signed off on? We don't know. We just don't know. Because Trump wouldn't let us know. He agreed to something with Vladimir Putin about America. And we can't find out about it because apparently there's a little-known OLC memo that Barr found that precludes the United States of America knowing what Donald Trump has done behind their back with a hostile foreign power that put him into power. On the same day that the Russian Duma went ahead and said, oh yeah, well, we're just going to throw away whatever fake constitution we've been living under all this time and just let Vlad run again and he can be leader for life. On the very same day. Okay. So maybe the agreement was that Trump's going to get some help so that he can maybe be leader for life. No matter what democracy says. No matter. We'll see. Joe Biden gave one hell of a heartfelt speech last night, didn't he? What a gracious man he is. Truly. You know, I have to say, at the core of Joe's being, he is a kind man. Do you ever think of the word kindness attributed to Trump and his administration? Kindness. The kind of kindness like a Candace Owen kindness. The kind of Candace Owens kindness that would go on. Was it Fox, Sinclair, Owen? Which one was it? Doesn't matter. Where she laughed and said, oh, 80-year-olds dying, it's okay. The life expectancy is only 76. That kind of kindness. Do you ever think of kindness ever attributed to anything about Donald Trump? Joe is an American, a true American, and Donald Trump is a traitor to America. Whereas Joe is failed, tragic, good, hardworking, loyal, smart, blue-collar, cultivated, and loved. All the things that Trump could never be. And doesn't want to be. He looks at those attributes as weaknesses. And look how his strength has fared us so well. A change has to be made. And I can assure you that military units are now being put in place to declare martial law. And this coronavirus pandemic will be used as an excuse. We already see armed military, paramilitary outfits of the NYPD locking down neighborhoods in New York, apparently with populations that just can't self-quarantine themselves good enough. I have to say, the only ones who aren't self-quarantining are the ones that got a lot of money and getting on jets and ocean liners. I don't think the gated communities, which would be very easy to close the gates on those places, I don't think those are the ones that are being surrounded by paramilitary units to make sure they don't get out. And why the hell, when you think of kindness, in the immigration courts, they could not get any word from anybody in the government about how to mitigate and what protocols to use for this pandemic in their courts. They could not get an answer from any arm of the government, any branch, and so they took it upon themselves, in consultation with county and local medical and state medical officials, drafted a poster, hung it up in the courts. You know, wash your hands, don't touch your nose, don't try to travel around too much. And the Trump administration said, take that down. You do not have the power to put up anything that you can put up until we say you can. Oh, yeah, they backtracked a little bit because it got out. But is that the kindness that we as Americans want to experience anymore? Do we allow a toxic third of this population who are so prone to treason? What else explains it then? They are willing to sell out America to kick the libs? What kind of reductionist high school behavior is that? The adults are going to have to fix it again. And then we'll just be called boomers. Yeah, it's the boomers' fault. Let the boomers die. Sorry. Do you hate your parents and grandparents so much? Is it just about getting them to go to another plane of existence so you can glom onto the material aspects of their largesse in this plane? Is that what it's all about? We are truly in this all together. Throwing away our old people. And I'm not just saying this because now I'm suddenly old. Look, I may be old, but I'm really immature. That should account for, balancing out it all, you would think. Am I immature anymore? Yes, we all are. Anyway, we don't throw away people. We don't throw away our grandparents and our parents. And we certainly don't want to throw away babies, kids, young adults. We are Americans. I know. Actually, logically, when you think about it, we almost have to give up on the toxic one-third because there's no convincing them. They're going to get into their rolling smoke monster trucks, spew diesel particulates all over the place, and shake everybody's hands after they've dipped it into COVID-19 just to prove that they can kick the libs. Oh, you don't like diesel smoke polluting the air around your house? Well, fuck you. Here we go. All right. That's the kind of people they are. We almost have to give up on them, and it goes against my whole spiel about we're all in this together. Even though we have to give up on them, we are still all in this together. These bugs don't care about geopolitics. They don't care about right and left. In fact, as far as I can tell, they don't care. They don't have the capacity to. All right, this is worse than any monster movie we've seen. This is worse than any alien spaceship movie we've ever seen. I got to tell you, this is worse than any virus movie we've seen also. This is right up there with the flu, H1N1 flu back in 1918. Erroneously called the Spanish flu. Oh, and Kevin McCarthy, you bigot racist. If you call it the Chinese coronavirus, the Chinese virus or whatever it is, one more time, I dare you, mofo. Say it just one more time. Yeah, he's a bigot racist, and he's been asked repeatedly to stop it. And media. You can stop, having stock photos of Asians with masks on. Okay? You know what that message is? Yeah, you better start thinking about this stuff. And if you are, and you purposely put it out there for the express purpose of what you want it to mean, well, that's why Resistance Radio is here. That's why Driftglass and Bluegal are here. That's why Sam Cedar is here. That's why Tom Hartman is here. This is why Randy Rhodes is here. Speaking of which, some program news, the TuneIn app has been updated. And so for those of you who were listening in on TuneIn, you can do it again. So if you're listening on something other right now, because how else would you? Go ahead, use your favorite app. And everything's been updated, and everything should be connected. It looked pretty good, and the crew and the vendor worked diligently. Tom was in the midst of that, helping write code, too. So, sorry about the delay on that. It's just one of those things. They need their periodic updates on their own platform, and now it has been done. So let's get into what we have going on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Well, COVID-19 has created a political reckoning for Trump, who insists the world was blindsided by the pandemic. Of course, 2 years ago, he decimated our pandemic response team in the CDC. And I got to tell you, it wasn't just the CDC. It was across the government, the federal government. Totally decimated it. And what was the excuse at the time? These things never happen. Yeah, they never happen, apparently. On the rest of the menu, a federal appeals court ruled the DOJ must hand over the grand jury materials from Mueller's investigation to Congress. We'll see if Bill Barr complies. The U.S. military said Trump's Taliban peace deal is mostly useless. Well, we knew that before, but it's good to hear the generals say it. And lawyers for U.S. soccer argued in a court filing that they cannot give the women's team equal pay because women athletes are less skilled and work less demanding jobs than male athletes. Now, I got to tell you, I've watched the women's team and I've watched the men's team, and the women's team keeps winning championships and bringing home the gold. And I got to tell you, the money. And how do they do it? By being highly skilled. Their skills are so top-notch. I actually enjoy watching the women's team play because it is a much more exciting game full of technique and skill that you don't see in the men's team. All right? Especially the U.S. men's team. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the UK Special Crimes Agency is probing the purchase of a London mansion by the ex-Kazakh president's grandson. And Dutch prosecutors charge that Russia tried to thwart their investigation of the shooting down of the MH17 commercial airliner. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link right there by the social media scroll. Definitely located by Superior Graphic Design that we thank Tom for. And Kelly Lincoln monitors the chat room, so do engage. And we also thank Kelly for doing the monitoring and all the other tasks that she does. Thank you, Kelly. If you would then look to the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice our secure link to our Patreon page. Yes, Netroots Radio, our homepage, is now once again secure. It's been updated and upgraded So feel free to be safe. Yes. If you go to our Patreon link and become a recurring Patreon, how about the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink once a month sent our way? We are quantum mechanics and stretching those dollars way, way, way beyond the quark ability. Even the crazy quark. I'm sure there's a crazy quark somewhere there. But we are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare because we have a lot of experience. Because you know why? Today is our 9th anniversary of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcasting. And we have been able to do this because of your generosity. Happy birthday to us! Oh, and a reminder, those of you who wanted benefits in becoming a recurring Patreon at certain Patreon benefit levels, I will be getting your bumper sticker and little ad block in the mail today. I've been a little bit preoccupied. I apologize. I certainly meant to do it closer to the first of the month. But it will be coming your way real soon. And thank you for your generosity, and to all the others who have recently become recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio. I cannot begin to tell you how much pressure it takes off. There's a lot of pressure in the world, and paying our bills and all the other fixed and variable costs that are required to run this powerhouse of resistance, as the founders originally intended, by the way. The pressure of that is alleviated because of your generosity, and we thank you from the bottom, truly from the bottom of our hearts. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of our Twitter media thing there. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of that Twitter thingy there at Justice Putnam. Go ahead, follow me there. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media. Except for, I can't do Facebook yet for another couple of days. But we do have a team here at Netroots Radio, and one of the tasks that Kelly does is social media director. So until the algorithm finds out how we have the workaround, she'll just post it on Facebook instead. Thank you. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and follow and pick up podcasts. Yes, podcasts by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube. Did I say iTunes already? Well, whatever. Wherever you can get podcasts, you can find us. We're everywhere. Down in the W's. Go ahead. Scroll all the way down there. Or better yet, just hit W, and you'll get to the WE's right soon. Okay, enough of this West Coast lingo and dialect. Let's go into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. It is Out of the Hill, which I normally avoid, by Harper Nedick. A federal appeals court in Washington ruled that the Department of Justice must hand over grand jury materials from former Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation to Congress. A 3-judge panel on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a federal judge's decision that the House's impeachment inquiry justified its request for the sealed documents, probably because it's always been that way. And it's only been different since we had the Vladimir Putin installed guy in the Oval Office who makes secret deals with the Russians that we don't know about and meets with Kislyak and Lavrov in the Oval Office where they dance and laugh, and the only way we heard about it was because of Russia media. Back to this article. In short, it is the district court, not the executive or the department, that controls access to the grand jury materials at issue here, Judge Judith Rogers wrote in an opinion for the panel's 2-1 majority. The department has objected to disclosure of the redacted grand jury materials. That's a tense sentence. Terse, too. But the department has no interest in objecting to the release of these materials outside of the general purposes and policies of grand jury secrecy, which are discussed do not outweigh the committee's compelling need for disclosure. Special Counsel Mueller prepared his report with the expectation that Congress would review it, Rogers wrote. Judge Thomas Griffith, who was appointed by former President George W. Bush, concurred with Rogers, a Clinton appointee. The lone dissenter, Judge Naomi Rao, was appointed by Donald Trump. The decision can be appealed. We are reviewing the decision, DOJ spokeswoman Carrie Cookbook said. Rao wrote in a dissent that Congress lacks standing to seek court orders for documents held by the executive branch, and that the panel should have ruled that the House no longer has a need for the materials that justifies an exemption to grand jury secrecy laws. A reasonable observer might wonder why we are deciding this case at this time, Rao wrote. After all, the committee sought these materials preliminary to an impeachment proceeding, and the Senate impeachment trial has concluded. Why is this controversy not moot? Because you're an idiot and you should have never been appointed, nominated, anywhere near a judgeship. Ever. The Democratic-led House Judiciary Committee sought access to the secret records last July in an effort to continue Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. But of course, there was a Persian government at that time to get rid of all the Russia experts and anybody investigating Russia. I wonder why. The panel later argued in court that its impeachment inquiry qualified as a judicial proceeding, meaning its request qualified as an exception to ironclad grand jury secrecy laws, like the other times they've ever had impeachment trials on judges, presidents, congresspeople, anybody. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler applauded the decision. The Justice Department has consistently provided grand jury material to the committee in past investigations involving presidential misconduct, but Attorney General Barr chose to break from that long-standing practice, and DOJ radically altered its position in an attempt to withhold this information, Nadler said in the statement. The court today correctly rejected DOJ's arguments and held that the committee is entitled to these materials. The committee remains committed to holding the president accountable to the rule of law and preventing improper interference in law enforcement investigations, he added. While the case has outlasted the impeachment inquiry and trial, House Democrats have not let up in their court battles for records from Trump and his administration. They suffered a loss late last month when another D.C. Circuit panel, led by Griffith, ruled that they could not sue to enforce a subpoena for testimony from former White House counsel Don McGahn. Griffith wrote for the majority that the courts cannot resolve conflicts between government branches, effectively rendering congressional subpoenas of the administration legally unenforceable. Griffith, who announced plans to retire last week, wrote in a concurring opinion that the grand jury case is distinct from the McGahn case. Unlike McGahn, this case does not involve a suit between the political branches over executive branch documents or testimony, he wrote. Instead, it involves an application for access to records of the grand jury, whose disclosure the district court has traditionally controlled. The House has asked the full circuit court to rehear the McGahn case. Emily Singer of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The peace deal Trump struck with the Taliban to end the war in Afghanistan is already falling apart, with the top U.S. commander saying that the Taliban is already violating the agreement by resuming attacks on Afghan forces. Well, maybe if we hadn't lied to them about the deal and then lied to the government of Afghanistan about the deal and get them to both sign deals that had nothing to do with the other, maybe we wouldn't be where we are right now in this peace deal. Just thinking. Marine General Frank McKenzie told the House Armed Services Committee yesterday, Tuesday, that if the Taliban continues with a level of violence, he will recommend that the military not withdraw troops from Afghanistan as laid out in the peace deal announced by Trump. Trump personally took credit for the deal, saying, "We think we'll be successful in the end." However, it apparently took less than 2 weeks for the Taliban to drop its end of the deal, carrying out at least 76 attacks since the deal was announced. One Democratic senator who was briefed on the situation said he thinks Trump got played by the group. "I got a classified briefing today on the agreement with the Taliban. I have been a supporter of negotiations with the Taliban, but the more I learn, the more concerned I become that Trump got fleeced," Senator Chris Murphy tweeted late Monday night. According to Murphy, the Taliban security guarantees are so vague as to be effectively void. It's not clear how we will track whether they are indeed renouncing terrorist groups. Hensley Clancy of BuzzFeed brings us this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Embroiled in a lawsuit over equal pay, lawyers for the U.S. women's national team's employer argued in a court filing on Monday that women athletes are less skilled and work less demanding jobs than their male counterparts, and they did it with a straight face? The filing was part of U.S. Soccer's attempt to prove that it has not discriminated against the World Cup champion team based on their gender, because what better way to argue that you're not discriminating by using a really misogynistic trope? Court documents filed in the equal pay trial, which captivated the country last summer after the women's team won its 4th World Cup title in France, show U.S. soccer lawyers arguing that under the Equal Pay Act, the job of a men's national team player carries more responsibility within U.S. soccer than the job of a women's national team player. U.S. Soccer also pointed to biological differences of indisputable science to argue that women should be paid less because the men's team requires a higher level of skill than the women's team. Really? The women's team plays like a team, and the men's team does not, no matter what their skill level. The Federation's lawyers grilled women's national team stars like Carly Lloyd and Alex Morgan over the fact that they were not as strong or fast as players on the men's team. Do you think that the team could be competitive against the senior men's national team? A U.S. soccer lawyer asked Lloyd. I'm not sure, Lloyd said. Shall we fight it out to see who wins and then we get paid more? As U.S. Soccer built its case, a lawyer for the organization asked Morgan, "Do you think it requires more skill to play for the U.S. men's national team than the U.S. women's national team?" "No," Morgan replied. "It's a different skill." Indeed. And I would actually proffer that the women's team is much more practiced, much more disciplined, and therefore much more skilled than the men's team. And they prove it by winning championship titles over and over and over again. And the men's team does not. Well, that brings us to our break period. Oh my gosh, look at the time. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, a Me Too day at the office. In the powerful but understated The Assistant, we get a look at a Weinstein-esque web of abuse far different from that in Bombshell or The Loudest Voice. There are no sex scenes or humiliated women commiserating. What we have is an assistant, Jane, played by Julia Garner from the Netflix series Ozark, beginning a day before dawn at an office, making coffee, fixing the copier, etc., all in the hopes of one day getting a shot at producing from the connected entertainment mogul who runs the company. She moves about her day amidst printer noises and off-camera conversations which gradually become foreground. She finds a piece of jewelry in the boss's office, engages with his wife on the phone, then with the boss about how she engaged with the wife. Then there are frat boys, plus a couple of years, who work in the office, listen in on phone calls, giggle, and give her borderline-to-meaning advice on ways to placate the big guy. Eventually, she's expected to onboard a second assistant, 18 years old and from South Dakota, and who's being housed at a 5-star hotel where the boss is known to take meetings. This causes her to go to see the HR manager, played by Matthew McFadden, who explains things with the same attitude he brings off in HBO's Succession. The published credits contain sort of a spoiler. There's no potentially oxygen-sucking male character as the boss, just a phone voice, a pivotal and bold decision from director Kitty Green that transforms the movie. The Assistant is a day-in-the-life picture. It covers no ground and reaches no conclusions, but as Garner's weary Jane makes her way home that night, still employed, character and audience have plenty to consider. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. Large ocean-going vessels like oil tankers and cruise ships produce noise that travels long distances underwater. That audio pollution can disrupt the sounds that marine mammals, fish, and other animals use to communicate.
When there's lots of noise from ship traffic, it basically masks those sounds so they just can't hear each other.
University of Exeter sensory ecologist Emily Carter. She wondered whether ship noise might also be detrimental to animals that don't rely on sound for communication. For example, young shore crabs that use camouflage to hide from predators.
So they can actually change their colour to match whatever it is that they're sitting on, basically to make it harder for predators to find them.
Carter suspected that stress from ship noise might hinder the colour change process. To find out, she and her colleagues collected juvenile shore crabs with dark shells and brought them back to the lab. They placed the crabs in tanks full of white gravel. An underwater speaker in each tank played quiet, natural sounds at all times. One group of crabs also heard loud, natural sounds every hour, but another group was subjected to hourly recordings of large ships. Carter says shorebirds, which eat the crabs, can see UV light, so she used ultraviolet photography to determine how well the crabs blended into their new habitat over time.
Through the eyes of a shorebird, so through a bird's perspective, were they camouflaged? Weren't they camouflaged? How obvious would they be?
After 8 weeks, the crabs that heard only natural sounds had become much lighter and were well camouflaged.
But the ones that were exposed to the ship noise didn't change colour as much, and then as a result, they weren't as camouflaged at the end of the experiment. So they'd be much more noticeable to a predator.
What's more, in another experiment, crabs failed to flee when they heard ship noise during a simulated predator attack.
They either didn't respond at all, or they did respond, but they were much, much slower to do so. So in a real-life setting, they would have been captured much more easily.
Carter says the stress caused by ship noise may interfere with hormones that regulate color change in crabs, or sap the energy needed to make the change efficiently. The study is in the journal Current Biology. The research not only puts a spotlight on the unintended consequences of noise pollution, but is a reminder that too much stress isn't just bad for people. It can also be deadly to wildlife that needs some peace and quiet. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Hanging in Adolf Hitler's office in 1931 was a large portrait of Henry Ford, because when it came to anti-Semitism, Hitler said, quote, "I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration." I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Facts regarding Ford's anti-Semitism are well-known, undisputed, and indeed self-authenticated. Some were included in a biographical sketch of him in a recent edition of the magazine of the Historical Society of Dearborn, Michigan, the birthplace of Ford's eponymous car company. In response to that article, the mayor of Dearborn, John O'Reilly, banned the distribution of the journal because the story interfered, he said, with his message and policies of inclusion. And O'Reilly, it seems, may well have full authority to censor the magazine because it's published by the city's historical commission, which is part and parcel and paid for by the city. Fortunately, censorship in America often backfires, and it did here. The mayor's attempted censorship has caused the article and the journal to be distributed far wider than it ever has been in the past. So now many, many more people, including many in Dearborn, know about Henry Ford's virulent and dangerous anti-Semitism, which is all to the good, because, as the philosopher and writer George Santayana said, quote, "Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it." The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. At some point in your life, you may have had someone call you a Luddite. Maybe you had a hard time programming your DVR or working the latest app on your smartphone. But at some point, technology gets the best of us all. But did you know the term Luddite has its roots in labor history? And on this day in labor history, the year was 1811. That was the day that British textile workers, known as Luddites, led an organized protest protest against new technology being implemented in their industry. The Industrial Revolution had transformed textile work in Great Britain. Water and steam powered new machines that sped up work and diminished the need for highly skilled labor. Skilled workers saw their wages slashed. A long war with France further devastated England's textile trade. One group of workers impacted were stocking makers in the Nottingham area. Angered by their loss of income, the workers decided to act. They gathered for an angry protest. They were inspired by stories of an apprentice stocking worker named Ludd, who was said to have broken his equipment in protest against an unfair boss. Whether the story of Ludd was real or a legend, the protesters became known as Luddites. The Nottingham Journal reported the workers, quote, proceeded with a premeditated determination to destroy some stocking frames employed in the area. The protesters spread across northern England as workers smashed the stocking frames with sledgehammers. Some workers paid with their lives. In April of the following year, a mill owner told his men to shoot into a large crowd of protesters, killing 3. The next day, British troops killed 5 more. Despite their protests, the Luddites could not halt the march of technology that brought dramatic change to their work. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of, maybe 60 to 63. Plenty of sunshine throughout the day, clear currently. Winds will pick up out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour and will decrease to light and variable conditions overnight when we will have mainly clear skies and a low in the low 30s. Tomorrow, expecting partly cloudy skies, a high in the low 60s, and winds will be light and variable. Increasing chance of precipitation, and it looks like we might have lots of precipitation, possible snow over the weekend. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to be exact. Pollen locally is rated at none. Air quality in the region is good at 24 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is a spring level of moderate at 4. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.17 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 84%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted, these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. I got to get my popping pea tape a little bit more popping, don't you think? Alrighty. London is 58 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 62 and cloudy with a flood watch. Oh my gosh. Rome is 64 and sunny. Kyiv is 46 and cloudy. Kabul is 44 degrees and cloudy. Hong Kong is 62 degrees and cloudy. Tokyo is 51 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 65 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 48 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Britain's National Crime Agency, known as the NCA, has asked a grandson of the former president of Kazakhstan to explain where he got the money to buy a multi-million-pound mansion in one of North London's most expensive roads. The house in the Bishop's Avenue, Hampstead, along with two other properties, is worth $104 million US, the NCA says, and has an underground swimming pool and a cinema. Can you watch the cinema from the pool? It is occupied by Nurli Aliyev, his wife Ada, and their children. Aliyev, 35, is the grandson of former Kazakh President Nursultan Nazarbayev. The NCA has barred any attempt to sell the properties and argues that the wealth used to buy them was linked to Aliyev's father and the former president's son-in-law, who was found hanged in an Australian jail in 2015 after being charged with the murder of two bankers in 2007. This is only the second time so-called unexplained wealth orders have been used in Britain since being introduced in 2018.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Stephanie Vandenberg and Bart H. Maher of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Dutch prosecutors accused Russia of trying to sabotage the investigation into the downing of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 in Ukraine in 2014, saying it cast a dark shadow over the impending trial of 4 suspects in the crash. Pre-trial hearings began in Amsterdam on Monday. Prosecutors say the defendants, 3 Russians and a Ukrainian, helped arrange the Russian missile system used to shoot down MH17, a civilian aircraft. All 298 people on board were killed. Most of the passengers were Dutch nationals. The sum of all facts casts a dark shadow over this investigation because there is strong indicative evidence that Russian government is keen to thwart the investigation, prosecutor Thies Berger told the hearing, part of which focused on testimony by witnesses who have not yet been named. Several witnesses in this investigation have said that they fear for their lives if their identities would come to light. Lawyers for one defendant protested at the prosecutor's remarks about Russia and argued that witness intimidation should not be addressed in open hearings. Oh, really? MH17 was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur on July 17, 2014. When it was shot down by a missile fired from territory held by pro-Moscow rebels amid fighting in eastern Ukraine. A team of international investigators in May of 2018 concluded the missile launcher, which shot down the aircraft, belonged to Russia's 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade. Russia denies any involvement. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.